This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and a big welcome back to the audience and a big welcome to all of our new friends from South Africa. Monday's program has blown up, and many of our new viewers are from the Republic of South Africa. So a big hello to you. Delighted that you've decided to join us at this podcast where we are helping to secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world, and I do hope you do stay with us in the days and weeks and months ahead. Ewen McKenzie, you've nailed your colours to the mast.
I've got the green.
Dragged out a bit.
I've got the green and gold on. You can interpret it whichever way you want.
Well, no, I don't think you can, because I could see the Wallaby there. I could see
World Cup 2003.
When you actually picked that up and put it on, and you looked at that 2003, what's the overwhelming emotion when you look at it? Did you think about it, or it's just another piece of kit?
I've got a lot of boxes of kit sitting out in the garage, and I don't ever wear. I seriously, I don't wear rugby stuff, and I don't have any on my walls. So it's all out there, stacked up and whatever. But it was a bit brisk, and I was actually getting something out for someone else. I was gifting someone something, and I saw this, and I thought, oh, that looks nice and warm. And so I had it out, and it's a bit brisk this morning, so I thought I'll put it on. It actually fits pretty well, so I thought, bugger it, I'm wearing it. So yes, I got the
there we go.
Got the colours nailed to the mast this week. Yeah.
Very good. Well, listen, we were I was certainly surprised when we recorded Monday's program. We were expecting that the teams would be named later in the week, but Rassie Erasmus came out in a sign of, or a display of some confidence, perhaps, that he was prepared to and didn't care if anyone knew who was going to be playing this Saturday. And we will come to our discussion about the side that he has selected and what we can expect at the match in Ellis Park on Saturday night. But before then, just to set a bit of context, you've been to South Africa a number of times with provincial teams, with national teams, but perhaps that 92 series, the reunification series, when Australia went to South Africa in 1992 as world champions, you must have fond memories of that time going to South Africa, because it was such an important tour.
Yeah, look, it was. And I had a couple of South African mates in Victoria when I was coming through, and we were able to watch they used to get the provincial games shipped across. So we used to watch that. So I knew a lot about the South African players, but obviously we never played against them. But you could see them on TV, and you could see the games, the Currie Cup games. They were massive, and they were massive players. And so it was always a bit of a fantasy to be able to get to play them. So when that opportunity came along straight after the World Cup, they weren't obviously in the 91 World Cup, so they got a chance to play the world champions, and they got a chance to play New Zealand as well, like over consecutive weekends. Looking back, I appreciate how politically complex it was. I probably didn't as a player appreciate it as much at the time, but it was such a different environment, such an important tour, and such an experience. Like we did so much in a short space of time, and we got to mix and play against those players. And in fact, I played with some of those players later in the year for the New Zealand anniversary for the World 15, so I got to play with some of those guys as well, not long after. But that tour was special, and a lot of things happened. For instance, I'll give you, on the field, we'd been watching South African rugby, and they'd been lifting in the line-out for many years, and the rest of us had been standing on the ground, and my role in the line-out was a line-out blocker. So the idea was to try and grab the jumpers from the other side and not let them jump, basically. That was your role. But then when you went there, when you line-out lift, you suddenly went from a line-out blocker to a line-out lifter. You had to lift everyone, so you didn't have time to block anyone. And so you focused on lifting. So we had to learn how to line-out jump in a week, basically. And so we went and played Northern Transvaal in Pretoria. That was our first experience lifting John Eales. Luckily, we had some athletes. John Eales was an athlete. Rod McCall, not so much. But getting them up in the air and being able to, Garrick Morgan, another, Troy Coker, getting these guys off the ground. We'd never done it before, so we had to learn that in a week, and obviously had to get that right for the Test match. So that was on the field. Off the field, never been a completely different country. The political scene was very hot at the time. There'd been a massacre just prior to the tour. I think 40-odd people had died in a massacre. So the tour was always on tenterhooks. There's always like political things going on. And we started off all together, the three teams. We had a big team photograph at Gold Reef City in Joburg. And then we ended up down a mine shaft having a barbecue or a braai, down a mine shaft with can girls and all sorts of things going on, hundreds of metres below the ground, with F.W. de Klerk and Steve Soweto from the ANC and the Zulu chief Bootalazi. We're all down under the ground. I'm thinking this is not good. So I got out. I'm a bit claustrophobic. I didn't stay underground very long, but a barbecue underground. Smoke, all those sorts of things. It worked, but it was for me. It was a bit touch and go. So I hung around with security up the top, and it was the All Blacks played them first, and we went to the game and sat in the crowd. It was at Ellis Park, and we sat in the crowd and watched it, thinking this is going to be interesting to see how the South Africans, after 23 years, how it was all going to go, because there's some big names in their team, and the All Blacks were good, and it was a tough game, but the political moment was, the ANC had agreed to this reunification tour, but no Dutch flags, no D-Stem, the national anthem not to be played, and Louis Late, I think he was the president of the rugby at the time, he played the anthem, and so we were obviously due to play the week after, and he played the anthem, so then it was all crisis. And we were in Port Elizabeth, I think, midweek, and Smoking Joe French, the Australian Rugby Union president, he was doing the deal, puffing away on cigarettes. He was trying to keep the tour. And we literally had a flight ready to go to Madagascar, I think, to get us out of the country because it was blowing up. But they paved it over, and we got to play in Cape Town. But the tour, we had 30 armed police in plain clothes, but with Uzis and God knows what else in their bum bags. They were with us the whole time. It was a real security, the worry of that, but I didn't feel that, and it only got better and better from there. We'd watch them play the All Blacks. Luckily, it rained for me. Luckily, it rained in Cape Town because
I remember it.
Yeah, I was playing against Johann Steiger, who no one probably knows. He played in the tests, and he came out on the tour and then retired. No one knows him. He wasn't a big guy, but he was like a bloody carjack. Like he was like a human carjack. And I was lucky the ground was. All I can say is, for me, I'm glad it was a wet track because he couldn't get good purchase. So he was hard work. Yeah, the guy you play the first time is always the hardest. And I was playing him for the first time, and that was a hard night scrum wise. And but we obviously won the game, but it was hard work. They came out in '93. And that was a tough tour. We won the series, but, geez, it was tough. So they've never been easy, and they've just kicked on, They've got the physical attribute. They had them there. They had the physical size. It was all there then, and then it's continued on. They've just got these beasts of players up front and fast backs, and, so it's been – and the country's evolved. We've got to experience that through the Super Rugby because we're there every year. With Test matches as well.
How did things change as you kept going there over the years? What did you?
We started with 30. We had more policemen with us than we had players. That's what it was like. But then by the last time I was there, and it's been a while, but we had one guy sitting at the front of the bus, just sort of making sure things were all right. So it sort of evolved a lot. We obviously knew the country better, but the country itself changed. I mean, there was the cities that were there when I first went there. You're in the centre of the centre-ville. You're in the centre of all the towns. The hotels and whatever. In Pretoria and Joburg and whatever, you're in the middle of town. By the time, 20 years later, you were in these sort of resort type shopping complexes and things like that in these sort of peripheral sort of suburbs and whatever.
Yeah.
So the centre of town has sort of moved out, and so there was some, from a town planning perspective, things had changed a lot. Where the different populations were. So I don't, but I as a coach, I tried to get the players out and about. There's lots of things to see, and there's lots of distractions. They're really good on the distractions. You go to Cape Town, let's go out and swim with the sharks, and everyone goes, yeah. So you have the day off, and next thing they've got the guys in a minibus driving for 6 hours, to go, and 6 hours back, I'm going, so they're rooted. They can't play the game, they're stuffed. That was meant to be the day off recovery, and they've done all this, shark diving and whatever. They've got all these. It's a really interesting place. You go to, Sun City, and this fantastic casino. Like Sun City is like nothing else. But it's, I went to Kimberley with the Waratahs. We're the world's deepest diamond mine. That's about the most exciting part of Kimberley. But I remember actually playing there. We played the Cheetahs there, and Rassie was the coach. Actually, Rassie at the time was he was infamous for he had his coloured light panels up there where he'd be switching his lights on and off, and that'd be telling the players what to do on the field, and everyone thought that was pretty good. So I just had our guys watching, my sideline guys watching the lights, so that we just track what was going on. But that's him. That's Rassie's. Rassie's always been innovative, and sometimes it reminded me of an episode of Get Smart or something like that. You'd be at training and the rubbish bin would be moving, and there'd be like some bloke sweeping the path or something like that. And you go, like there was no private places to train. Like in South Africa, it didn't matter where you went or what you couldn't train. You couldn't train without people watching you. And so when you got to the game, every little trick you thought you might have had, it wasn't a trick. It wasn't a trick anymore. It was like well covered.
Do you remember Rassie? But do you remember him as a player? And probably again in your Brumbies days, I think he might have come a couple of. You might never have played against him, did you?
Oh, it was actually funny. So I was trying to work that out, but I think I might have encountered him once or twice, but maybe not. I was out there, and I finished in '97, so I'm not quite sure what his era was. But he was the same. Yeah. He was the same personality. He was, he was always had a big presence. Didn't he? That's right. And you get to see with the Super Rugby. Used to be, I don't know if it's still the same now. You used to have a conference every year. All the coaches and referees would get together and talk about different scenarios in the game, whatever. And I got to know him there and appreciated his thinking and how much thought he puts into the game. And he's looking for edges, which is what Rob McQueen did. He's the same type of guy. He's always looking for an edge, and you see that in his coach comes out on the field. And I really appreciate that. Someone trying to think about the game and trying to be ahead of everyone else rather than just copying. So I appreciate that. Eddie made the comment the other day about him being a great selector, and he clearly is. He's built great depth, and he hasn't always been the coach in name, but he's been the most influential, and he's managed the program there for some time. So he's certainly respected in all of those spaces. Yeah, but he cut his teeth in Super Rugby like I did, and we clashed many times.
Have you noticed an evolution? Have you noticed a change in the way that he goes about his work, or is it those sort of simple principles of looking for innovation, looking for edge, looking to develop players? Has he been quite consistent really in the way that he goes about his work?
I think he's definitely evolved because. He's in a national position as opposed to when he was coaching the Cheetahs, So when you're coaching the Cheetahs, you've got your squad environment, whatever, and they weren't the most successful team there, but he was trying things, across that era. But he was trying things and trying to be better. But since he's been in the national program, obviously he's got all the levers at his disposal. So. He's not unlike Eddie. When Eddie's in a national position, he'll use every lever he can to try and find an edge. And we saw him off looking at Formula One. He'll look for things like that. I'm sure Rassie's similar. But he's probably looking more at Europe now than obviously our way. I'm really disappointed that we don't have the contact with South African rugby that we used to have, the regular contact, yes, from a life experience point of view, but also from a rugby perspective. I really think that them dropping out of Super Rugby has been to our detriment, but it hasn't harmed them. In fact, it's probably been a wise move by them. It's a big move, but they're all on the same time zone now. They can play in Europe, overnight flight, a bit like us going to Japan. You're in the same time zone, so you have none of those issues. You can sort of get in and out much better. And it's probably been better for them because they've got a lot of resources, so they're able to distribute them amongst teams in the Premiership and Saracens and the like. They've had players all over the place, so they can monitor them better. They're all on the same time zone, so it helps. So I'm sure he's been instrumental in manufacturing that environment. But I think it hasn't necessarily helped Australian rugby. I think that we did well by going there and playing against them and them coming here as well.
So it's interesting. I think in this team that has been selected for Saturday night, there are the sort of domestic players who play in the European competition, but then there's quite a reasonable number of them who have been playing in Japan as well. How would you go about monitoring and understanding just exactly how they are progressing playing in the Japanese competition when comparing it against performances in the URC?
Well, that's a good question. We talked about them having 5 teams worth of test standard players, and I guess they swap around, and that is where the skill comes in for someone like Rassie. I'm sure he's watching. I'm sure he gets the games delivered to him. We don't see the games here. Well, I don't see them through the normal channels. Obviously, there's probably a way to watch them, but it's trying to assess what the relative standard. And so, he must have whatever markers he used to be able to make those decisions about whether they're still relevant or whether someone's coming through. But I guess he mix and matches his teams a lot when he is playing, and he's just played those 2 Italian games, the Georgian game. That gives him a chance to just see where guys are at. But they've been accepting of that situation for some time now, and they've made it work. We were talking about it 2 weeks ago, about the Giddo law and whatever. They've been doing that for some time, cherry picking players out of different competitions, and therein lies their depth.
So Monday, we recorded the program and we were talking about, let's wait until we see the team. And generally you don't see the team until 48 hours before kickoff. But Monday in South Africa, Rassie's gone, don't worry about that. Here's my team. What did you think of that move of him? Is that just a flex of some sort to be able to say, look, I don't care who you... I don't care if you've got a week to look at our team to think about it. I'm confident that I've selected the best team for this match.
Oh, definitely. I think he's done that before. I've done that at times. Sometimes you just feel like it's better to be confident and get out there with the team. People are watching and speculating. I don't think there's any surprises. I don't feel like there's going to be surprises in the game. It's a matter of being able to deal with it. So he's picked pretty much his first 15 with a few from the second 15 is what I'd call. So he's got a pretty strong side. So I think he's just saying, well, there's 2 parts of this. First of all, that's what he's doing. Now, whether that's the team that runs out, let's just wait and see. So he's quite prone to be able to, we just changed a few things, the depth, so he'll keep the upper hand that way. So, because it doesn't change. Yeah. Well, they're all playing the same game plan, right, for South Africa. The method is the same. So you can swap someone in at late notice or theoretically in late notice. He's just named a team, and so everyone will focus on that, and then maybe it'll be different on the night, but they all play the same way, so they'll practice differently. So that won't surprise me either.
No, well, he has said that, he sort of reserved the right to change his mind.
Of course.
Given, depending on what he sees when the Australian team gets selected, he may make some changes. But when the team was announced and you had a look at it, what were your first thoughts?
Yeah, I liked it. I liked the team, particularly the forward pack. I like it when Malcolm Marx plays. I think he's one of the most dynamic hookers in the world, and he's played off the bench quite a bit. So him starting's good. The second row is outstanding. Back row, he's talking about Khaleesi playing at number 8, Rassie, and making the point that the role of the number 8 at scrum time is not as significant as it used to be, and therefore he's really just got what he considers his 3 really good back rowers out there. So I like the way he's thinking. Do you agree
with that?
Yeah, I can see where he's coming.
Do you agree with that?
We've been rotating number 8s in the Wallabies for some time. There hasn't been. Wilson's been there, but we've had other guys playing there. So I don't see it as the same role as it used to be. No one talks about. I don't even know if the hooker strikes. It doesn't even strike for the ball anymore, right? So they feed the second row and it just rolls out. In my day, you had 3 different. The hooker actually hooked for the ball. You had 3 different channels. You could channel a ball across the scrum, and the number 8 could pick it up on the far side. There was a lot of sophistication in how the ball came out of the scrum, when it came out, and then what the number 8 was going to do. If he's going to carry, occasionally you see the number 8 carry the ball from the scrum, but generally it's just passed. So it's just in and out, and the 9 will move it. So there's no back row plays or anything like that. Occasionally, yes, but unless you've got a dynamic ball player or someone quick off the mark, they'll just shift the ball. So it's different. So I know what he's saying. In the backs, he's got certain players there. Like Creel at 13 for me he's like a mainstay. He's always there, right? He plays in there because he's very good in the defensive role. And, I think they've had key players like that. Malherbe, who plays, if I looked at his selections over time, Malherbe at tight head was always picked in the game. He was always there, and then the other people had changed around, but he always had the same tight head. He must be injured, I think, at the moment. I'm not sure, but so that's a change. But Creel's another, always at 13, and he gives them the defensive line speed and the pressure in defence in particular. He's not so much a ball player, but he's a very good defensive reader and whatever, and he keeps the pressure on. So they've got key players like that. They've got a lot of X factor there. So they've moved on from guys like LaRue. Willie LaRue used to always be around the team. He'd come on, he'd play it sometimes at fullback and give him direction, a lot of talk, communication, be a quasi 10. But they've moved on from those sorts of things now, so you can see that they're moving into the next phase. So they've got good players coming off the bench. They're digging a bit deeper in the props areas, but the rest of the guys, Quagga Smith is always on the bench. Rassie uses him every game off the bench. He's really good, he's good on the ball. He's got good energy. So he's got key players that he uses to lift the intensity of the performance. He talks about his B team, the Bombers, and coming onto the field and changing things. So he does rely on those guys to make a difference. So there's a few newer faces there, but pretty solid side.
But so in terms of that reserves, he's gone for a 5-3 bench. The old 7-1 isn't in place. Why do you think he's thinking that he needs a few more backs than that dominant forward bench that he's gone for in the past?
Maybe he's just thinking he's got enough. Maybe he's got a few injuries in the backs. Maybe it's a fitness thing. He's got a couple of guys that maybe might be carrying something. I don't know. Maybe they're going to shift the ball a bit more. But they'll play hard at you anyway, so I don't think using the ball will be part of their game. But maybe they're just carrying a few injuries. I'm not sure. So he just mixes it up.
Interestingly, Faf de Klerk, Andre Pollard, Willie LaRue, they're still in the squad. They're still in that wider squad. But do you think that this selection denotes that turning point where it's now, moving on to, the next generation? Your Grant Williams, your Manny Libbocks, fussy at fullback.
Yeah, I think that's what's going on. I mean, it's probably the same as Nick White for the Wallabies. You've got Faf. Faf was a mainstay there for a long time. He's been in Japan. Eddie made the comment the other day that he might be even 5th or 6th ranked, So that's, but I'm sure Rassie knows he can put him out there and he'll do the job on any given day. But obviously he's trying to develop other players and bring other players through. So that's what happens. But Morne talked about him playing next week in the week after in Cape Town. So he's already thinking about his selections there, and I don't know why that would be different, but it might have a different set of tactics, or maybe thinks about the altitude and playing at sea level differently. I don't know, but he seemed, he's talking about staying, maybe being the 10 in Cape Town. So for some reason, there's a tactical decision there to be made, but maybe he's just talking just to keep the media interested. I don't know. People like me listening go, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." So I don't know. I don't know why. Well, so we'll wait and see. But maybe he's just sharing the load. Different style of player, though.
Probably one of the matchups. And again, is this relevant when you think of the Australian talisman in the forward pack is Will Skelton. We've spoken a lot about that over the last few weeks and how important he is to lead the Australian forward pack. For South Africa, you've got Etzebeth, who's just been a giant for them for many, many years. Do you match those two against each other, or is that not relevant? They're just both on the field doing what they do, but it's really not a Skelton versus Etzebeth sort of contest.
Yeah, it's not. It won't be a contest head-to-head like that. I mean, in general play, they might pop up. If we can remember recent footage with Alan Alatoa and Etzebeth, having words on the field. Etzebeth generally is in amongst it, and so I'm sure that those two will run into each other literally somewhere on the field, and it'll be interesting. So, the yellow cards, all that stuff. I know I say it every week, but that makes a difference. So the level of discipline in the aggression will be quite important. I think that, and Eddie's made the point before, the referees will be they'll be looking out for the third man coming in and those sorts of things, off the ball, slightly after the whistle type stuff, or slightly late. I think we've got a Kiwi ref, so we'll see see how it goes. But I'm sure those two will literally run into each other on the field more than once. And
so in terms then of the way you think that the game might be played, given that it is at altitude, it's a faster game. The ruck speed is there. Fatigue comes into it. Players like, Grant Williams around the base of the ruck, around the base of the scrum is always a threat. Absolutely, has jet shoes. How do you think the game might evolve?
I think that they'll be aware of the physical aspect that Australia was able to produce against the Lions in the third test. So, I would be, if I was them, I'd be looking to maybe shift the ball and move the Australian forwards around a bit more, tire them out faster. Try and get the forwards moving side to side, rather than sort of playing. So they actually got to introduce an aerobic aspect to the game. So I think with the backs they've got, they can move the ball around. I'm not talking about lots of ball movement, but I'm sure they'll use the width of the field. And that means that the Australians have to cover the width of the field, so the forwards will have to move a lot more. We've got a pretty agile back row, probably, depending on how they pick it. And the second row, got guys like Skelton and Tupu. It'll be interesting to see how they go in terms of game time, because it'll be a bit tougher for them, especially if there's a bit more movement in the game, lateral movement I'm talking about. So Rassie might have some ideas about that, but the formula. The forward formula will be similar. I've said it many times. They'll kick off. It's sort of pretty well known what they'll do. They'll kick off and then they'll be looking for penalties. They'll look for pick and drive. They'll drive. They'll second shove at scrum time. All of that stuff to keep you honest up front. And then but they'll run at you and make you tackle them. And these guys, I was having a look at some stats. I think these guys, the post tackle meters is important to them. That means that they're punching through, getting past the tackler. They're very good at doing that because they've got big bodies. So that means that to get into the ruck, it's just a couple of meters further backwards you've got to go. So that's where the momentum comes from, and it makes it harder for the forwards to get into the ruck or around the ruck into a defensive position. So being able to stop them at the advantage line or behind the advantage line is the challenge.
And that's probably where someone like Esterhausen comes into it. He's certainly a big man who will be, make Len Ikitau's night challenging, I would imagine, that they'll be getting him to do plenty of work.
Yeah, well, they've been developing, I guess, him in that 12 role. They've had the centre combination's been pretty settled for some time, but he's getting a chance there. So I'll be really interested to see how he goes. Yeah, that's the sort of thing I'm talking about. Creel's obviously a hard runner, but he's a really good defence organiser, and I'll be. I don't think there's going to be much subtlety. I think it'll be quite aggressive and fast. So the speed of it's going to be the other aspect. Wouldn't surprise me if they've got some tap and go and a few things like that to try and get a bit of momentum in the game and a bit of width. So run the forwards around a bit, and then see what happens after that. But there'll be the high balls because you get good purchase. For your kicks will go further and higher and whatever. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of that to test out a few guys as well.
How important is it in something like the Rugby Championship to get off to a successful start, to get off to a win?
Having coached in it, it's a tough. It's a harder tournament to win than the World Cup because it's the nature of the quality, the number of games you've got to win. Like in a World Cup, you've got to get out of the pool and you've got to win a quarter, so you play 6 or 7 games. You've got to, of which probably a couple of them are going to be, top 3 teams. You're going to play against a top 3 or 4 team maybe once or twice, maybe once in the pool and maybe in the semi or a final. Whereas the Rugby Championship, 2 against the All Blacks, 2 against South Africa. Like these 2 against South Africa in South Africa. In New Zealand, you might get it home. Depends on the year. And Argentina, they've been top 4 for the last few years too. So where's the easy game? So if you drop a game, you think, shit, I've got another 5 to go. And I'm like, where am I going to get a win? I've got to get a win here somewhere. So it's really tough. And it doesn't matter how you start. You can start, there's no soft start. Argentina, there's no easy game there to warm up or get your combinations right or whatever. You're on the road too, so you've got the challenges of that. So it's really tough. Yeah.
And what about that transition from, Johannesburg down to Cape Town? What's that like to deal with?
Well, I think having done the trip to South Africa so many times, the Joburg start is the best outcome for the Wallabies. It's one flight and you park up somewhere. I don't know where they're staying, but you park up and you're just there and you play. So normally, if you're playing like Super Rugby, you'd fly into Joburg and then you've got to do another flight into Durban or Cape Town or a bus trip to somewhere. So to play the Cheetahs, depending on where the game is. So you've always got that extra bit. And that's always a real punish. So they've got a good start that way. They'll be able to get down to Cape Town in an easy way. So it's a good trip in for them. It's a bit. They'll coming from Cape Town out. It's a long day, but I think it's probably the best itinerary that the Wallabies could have got in terms of travel.
All right, well, there's something to look forward to, and certainly we'll be talking about that second test at the right time, and we'll be previewing the test match again on Friday. But Ewen McKenzie, thank you very much for joining us on the Wednesday edition of Rugby Unity, and a big thanks again to Ben Alexander for his contribution to the Wednesday program on Rugby Unity through the Lions Tour. And from next week, we will be creating a program or producing a new program which is going to focus on the Women's Rugby World Cup. And joining me as a co-host will be the Wallaroo Bella McKenzie, and we will be following everything that is happening in that Women's World Cup in the lead up to and during over the next number of weeks as it starts and then moves through to its conclusion. So certainly looking forward to focusing on what should be and needs to be really, I think, an important occasion for rugby. So Ewan, actually, just before I let you go, your thoughts on the women's game and where it is and how it needs to move forward. We're seeing such growth at the moment in women's sport more broadly. If you have a look at North America, for example, the WNBA has exploded off the back of Caitlin Clark's presence. But it really has, the numbers that are now being paid for the franchises in the WNBA are eye-watering. But then if you have a look at the women's football in Europe, you see women's football in North America, there's softball leagues, there's volleyball leagues. It really is on a tear at the moment. Where do you see the future? And where is the opportunity for the future growth of women's rugby?
Well, I think if you work backwards from by having a World Cup, a world stage, you give yourself the best opportunity to be seen. And I think that's worked in other sports. I think there might have been a bit of an aversion, I'm talking 20 years ago now, about where women's rugby fitted in the Australian context, because obviously they chose to support the Sevens pathway for introducing the sport into schools and the like. And I think that a lot of decisions in Australia have been made around the contact nature of the sport and whether, trying to make something be a bit more. And they've shied away from things that, maybe when mums and dads are making decisions about what sport their child plays, I'm talking male and female, that the contact side of it's been a big decision. So they've tried to tidy up rugby in that sense to make it more friendly for the underage groups. And all the head rules, all concussion rules, all that sort of stuff's been important. So the game has been modernised in that way. So now I think it's a good opportunity to really push the game itself. It's easier to promote the game itself because if you run off the back of the 15-a-side game worldwide, there's a lot of countries playing, there's a lot of facilities, there's a lot of whatever. So I think it's easier to piggyback in that space. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for Australia to develop in there. The question is, as I said the other day, like where does the Sevens program sit? Because that's a hybrid. And so the Sevens has got a place, but in terms of investment, where does that sit? It's very hard to see us in Australia doing all of that. And this World Cup will showcase, like we've seen in other sports, there's a lot of TV content now in AFL and Rugby League, and they're certainly not, the contact side of the game certainly not been an issue. So the context side of sport. So I think it's all great. I think we need to really focus on the 15-a-side game because I think it mirrors and for people to understand it as fans. If you're coming in as a new fan, you've got to be able to see it. Watching hybrid versions of it, it's going to becomes confusing. So I think we've got to really work out where the limited money we have is going to be allocated. And whether we pursue one or the other in an Australian context, I don't know that we'll have the money to do both. And I think we can do more in the 15-a-side arena than we can in the 7-a-side arena. I might be wrong.
It's interesting, though, and this is where, the World Cup the last Women's World Cup was staged in New Zealand, interrupted by COVID. I think it was in 2022. And there was a great, such a memorable event and particularly the final where New Zealand got up over England to win it. But to me, there seemed to be this real focus around it at the time. And I thought back then that it was the moment that, okay, women's rugby is really going to take from here, but it really hasn't. It sort of tended to, it went back rather than go forward. That's only my opinion. How do you take it forward? How do you make sure that because I've got no doubt in the world that this Rugby World Cup in England will be a great success. I think the way that they've priced the tickets, the size of the stadiums that they're playing in, people will want to get involved. It's a beautiful time of the year weather-wise for people to be out watching footy. So I think that's going to be a great success. But the key thing is then, okay, what happens next to make sure that the momentum grows so as it can become more sustainable, more commercial? Because obviously at the moment, the women's game doesn't generate a lot of revenue. And, to sustain itself over time, it is going to have to solve that problem. So what do you think about that idea of then, going post whatever, final is played? How do you then make it, how do you keep it going? How do you keep the success rolling?
It's the same problem or theoretical problem as you have with Olympic sports. There's a lot of interest at Olympic, you watch the Olympics and we all watch the rowing and we watch the swimming and things like that, but and we watch the hockey and all that stuff, and we're all there on the day, cheering and whatever. But then and I feel sorry for the athletes. What happens? They got to fight for survival in between the Olympics. So there's other things that go on, and we're now getting coverage. If you watch the sports channels, you do see the rowing and you do see the hockey. So there's a lot more coverage. I think the platform, you work backwards I think you just got to keep plugging away with the World Cups and then find these tournaments in between that are relevant. And we've been trying to do that with the women's, with playing the All Blacks, and it's sort of like a quasi sort of Bledisloe type, trying to get that going. I think you've got to start then linking the games. I know in like an AFL they run a different season. They run a different season for the women's game. In rugby league, they run in parallel. I think in rugby, you've probably got to manage, maybe start trying to put games together on the same day so you can share the venue costs and things like that, and try and do it that way. Maybe that's happening. I don't know. I'm not that close to it, but try and from a spend point of view, try and capitalise that way and try and sort of develop teams in and around things where the costs are already going to go. We don't have to add more costs.
Well, they have been doing that. I know.
Yeah.
They have, Earlier this year, there was at a Brumbies game, the curtain raiser was the Wallaroos versus the USA.
Yeah.
And they put them together, and I know in a number of Super Rugby matches, the women's teams have played before the men's teams. But
in terms of developing, it's ideally you're going to try and get the Brumbies women's team playing against the Queensland women's team on the day, the same day. So you're trying to get the alignment, the cultural alignment, and the passion in the fans and stuff like that, because it all aligns on the night. So that's one thing that rugby could look at to do that. But there's a way to go, but you've just got to keep at it. As I say, you have to make the hard decision is going to be about where seven sits in relation to 15s, and sort of the amount of money you want to invest in that. That's an Olympic sport. The old days, I'm going back to the Ellis and whatever. They just rocked up and played in the Hong Kong Sevens. There was this big, and they went there and they rocked up and they just played. They fell out of the back of the 15s program and they played. But now they're running there's an international season for sevens. So are you in it or not? Wales weren't in it. Now they've got involved, but they weren't in it at all for a long time. So obviously they made a decision there. It's a question of how you deal with the World Rugby's calendar for sevens versus 15s. And so, it is just that's the bit that you've got to work out. That's what administrators have to do, the calls you've got to make.
Well, they have made some changes recently to the sevens tournament because it was costing them so much money. They've had to cut it back. So I think they've reduced the numbers of teams that play in the sort of top level competition. But interestingly, I think the seven-a-side at the Paris Olympics really captured a lot of people's imaginations. You know, rugby sat sort of by itself before, the opening ceremony. They were able to play at the Stade de France. They had those couple of days there where I think there was something like 500,000 people on, 6 different sessions. It was packed out. The rugby was compelling to watch. I remember just, both the men's and the women's being played at the same time. So I think, I don't know, that to me was such a high point for sevens. And, whether or not, but that was, as you mentioned, it's like 2 days every 4 years where, it has the world's attention. And then beyond that, it's really, it's hard work to get people to engage with it.
Yeah, it's like a lot of the sports at the Olympics. Everyone's engaged for the 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks of the Olympics. They're right into it, and everyone's supporting their country. So maybe they got to look at that and work out how that's going to. If they're already pruning back, then obviously costs are an issue. So then you're losing the access to it from other countries and whatever. So what do you do in the meantime? It used to be a much smaller program. As I said, it used to be people from the 15-a-side program would drop out and play it, or some guys around the edges or whatever, and would be played in that context. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to sevens because it's clearly professionally developed a lot in terms of the tactical and technical expertise that goes on. So, but in the end, you've got to get your best bang for your buck. And I look at it from our perspective in Australia, but England's got a different situation. They've got a lot more money. They've got heaps of money, so it's different. So they probably have a different perspective. So we just need to work out. Sevens gives players an opportunity, but less players. 15-a-side, obviously you got more, but you got more costs. You got to move them around and whatever. But it might give more people an opportunity to play. Now that they've tightened up the game in terms of the safety side of it, maybe we should be pushing it more.
All right, well, we're not going to solve that problem today, but certainly we will be continuing to discuss issues like this as we continue here at Rugby Unity to try to help to secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. And if you have any thoughts about anything that we've discussed today, please be in contact, send us an email, jump into the comments on YouTube, comment on TikTok, wherever it is that you are consuming, on Instagram, wherever it is that you're consuming our Rugby Unity content, please. We are very interested in the views of the audience, the third voice, as we like to call it here at Rugby Unity. It's so important that we get people expressing their views because ultimately the future prosperity of the game comes down to the actions of rugby fans. It's not World Rugby, it's not the national unions, it's not the professional teams, it's the people who will decide the future prosperity of the game. So being involved, expressing an opinion, taking an action, getting involved, that is what is going to help us to support this great game. As we all get a little bit excited, I've got to say, ahead of the opening match of the Rugby Championship this weekend. So we'll be back on Friday with our detailed preview with Eddie Jones and Ewen McKenzie. A final thank you is also we have now crossed the 1,000 YouTube subscriber mark. So a very big thank you. And to that person, we're going to work out who in fact it was. And you are going to be announced in Friday's program with the booty that it is that you will take away with the honour of being our 1,000th YouTube subscriber. So we'll be announcing that on Friday. And jumping across to the Rugby Unity Substack, my latest editorial is about R360. Many of you who've listened to the program know my views. I've sort of I haven't dialed it back too much at this stage. But anyway, Jump across. If you want to know what I think about R360, jump across to the Substack Rugby Unity, and we'd love to see your engagement there. And again, giving us your views there, we would appreciate that as well. So, Ewen McKenzie, a big thanks to you. I'll let you get back to your busy day, and to you, the audience, a big thanks for you coming along. And if you can, like and subscribe. It does help the program to be found. And now that we are through our 1,000th YouTube subscriber, great things ahead. The algorithm is going to treat us even more kindly than it has in the past. So if you could like, subscribe, share, all of those different things, that would be fantastic. So a big thanks to you, the audience. So listen, we'll be back on Friday. Please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.